Hello everyone and welcome to another Third Age Reforged replay. Today we have a 4v4 pitched battle, which I'm just going to start it slowly off now. For those watching, today we're going to have Kuro on the battlefield, so you'll be able to see whether one of the mod creators is up to scratch, I suppose, against yourselves. And again, as always, you're seeing this for the first time alongside myself, so we'll have to see how it goes. Now, we're going to quickly sort of skim through the army compositions while we wait for the positioning. You may see some of these guys teleport around a little bit as they set themselves up, but we'll manage as best we can. So we have the Orcs of Gundabad by J Munster. He's bringing some Warg Riders along with some Orc Marauders. There's some Marauder Berserkers who, again, as I said before in my Moria video, I think they're quite... I really quite like these guys for the price. I think they're a really good unit. We have Uruks of the Black Mountains, Witch Realm Hammers, excuse me. Fantastic unit, really strong, very powerful, definitely a force to be reckoned with. Witch Realm Skull Ragers, some good about Spearmen, some Numenor Shadow Guard in ambush position. These guys are really good archer unit. Definitely a fantastic addition to the roster, where in the past the evil factions have sometimes have difficulties with ranged units. Good about Spear Guards again. Some more Berserkers. Some Orcs of the Black Mountain. Witch Realm Scourge. We've got a Ballista back here for sniping out catapults. And then it looks like his fodder's back here, Marauders. He's got some Witch Realm Blackguards, which are a great unit. Probably his General's unit, actually. Some more Marauders, and some more Warg Riders just to finish it off for taking out Cav. So he's taking a bit of a mix, really. He's got some good sort of lower tier units, followed up with some very strong high tier. He hasn't got much in the way of missile units. He's just got the one, which is the ambush missile unit. And it might mean that he's going to be possibly quite aggressive, which is another reason maybe he's taking the Ballista, because he's looking to blob up, push through, break units. Moving over to his ally then, we have the High Elves, and I'm not even going to try and pronounce that name, although it would be quite funny. We got some Myth Lord Nobles, we got some Warriors in the front, we got some Storm Guard. Again, for people who haven't seen them, not only do they look great with their sort of red cloaks, they're actually a really great unit, really fantastic. Are they worth the cost? I think they probably are, in my opinion. You can see them trying to sort of struggle in formation around there. Interestingly enough, although they're called warriors, they are a missile unit. So if I'll just go and you can see them there. Relatively well armoured, and this sort of almost camouflage-like design in the bronze. Definitely he's gone for a much heavier missile unit, as you'd expect from the elves. It might be to counter the sort of lack of range that J-Monster's taken over to the side, and maybe they're looking to try and balance their forces in that regard. Phallus Lords, they seem to be a staple of late in terms of people taking them along. They're a great unit. And then some sort of mid higher tier swordsmen. Again, some more nobles. Again, another noble unit. So is that 3 nobles units? Wow, that is 3 units. And again, some more archers. So, unlike before, where we saw a lot of marauders, a lot of sort of foot troops, here we're seeing very elite high-tier melee forces, but actually the bulk of the force seems to be ranged, which again counters what J-Monster's bringing. Going past sort of this sort of bit of a fort. It'd be interesting to see if any of them use that, take position up on the hill. Currently it doesn't look like they are, but we're moving over now to Boris, who's playing as Rohan. Again, like the video last time for Bunker Hill, good number of infantry that he's taken for Rohan. Again, as we're saying, I think it's a good sign of the mod where Rohan doesn't have to take 90% cavalry. Because some Royal Guard, really good unit, especially if you saw the previous video. We got some Axemen of the Ridmark. Again, I think we're probably going to see a lot of these sort of shock units today. We've got some dismounted Royal Guard. Some Helmingers to make up for the missile. Some more dismounted, some Ridmark Axemen. And then for the remaining cav, we've got some Royal Guards. and he's taking a ballista with him. He got Marshals of the Red. I was wondering if he would take them. I expect that's probably going to be his general's unit, and you can see they're really. I mean, definitely, if you haven't got one of these your Rohan sort of setup right now, certainly see if you can find a way of fitting them in. Moving last over then to another high elf army here for the far side, which is interested to see if they've got anything really different. They've got a lot of warriors again, as you can see. Wow, a hell of a lot of warriors. This is a much more of a breadth of forces, though, from the looks of it. So they've got Sword Quindy, 3 units of Sword Quindy, in fact. We've got some Storm Guard here, some Standard Stormmen, some Spearman Guards, some more Swordsmen, some Sword Quindy, 1 Noble unit, and more Sword Quindy. So, if you remember before when we looked at the other High Elf army, it was very much about sort of the lords, the Phalas lords, Storm Guards, very expensive units. What we've got here, although we have a similar number in terms of missiles, we've actually got a lot of cheaper melee units in regards to the Sword Quindy. And the only other difference really, we've got some of the Riders and Missile Cav. I think again I saw over here, we've got the Heavy Lancers. Now, for you, those of you that did the tournament with us, the Lancers were kind of I guess, the unsung heroes, or slightly OP, depending how you viewed them, as how fantastic they really were and how deadly they could be. So we'll be interested to see whether, with the minor changes we've had since the tournament, whether these guys can still do the same sort of punishment that they were before. But more importantly, I'm interested to see whether this sort of width of army, I guess you could say, taking a lot of the light infantry, will be superior than, say, taking the more expensive melee units which the High Elves have taken over the far side. What I would say is that Rohan's army seems relatively balanced in terms of a mixture of ranged and melee. High Elves seem to have been going for a sort of a few choice elites, but otherwise, again, quite an overwhelming size. The Orcs on the far side have taken a lot of ground troops and very little in terms of range. And then the other High Elf army here is very much about elite forces. None of them are taking catapults. The only things we've got knocking around is a couple of ballistas, again for sniping purposes. Be interested to see whether their opponents have taken catapults or not. Let's just speed it up slightly until the point phase is over, and we'll have a look at the other forces. The interesting thing, as I said before, this is going to have Kuro in, so I'm not quite sure which forces he's going to play as, so it'll be interesting to see who he's facing and what he's taking with him. And we'll just slow it down now. We'll just take it down a little bit while we look over everybody. Do it to half speed for now. So here we go. We've got the first of the sort of opposition forces. Actually, I might have to take it down a little bit slower again because I can see them on the move. So we have Rune here. We have some Brotherhood of the Lance with some tribesman Javi unit. We've got some crossbows. We've got the spear unit. I'm pretty sure I maybe pronounced them correctly last time. The Varag Cathrax, but again, I'm sure I've done it incorrectly. It's worth checking it out. I'm sure you can comment below. We got some Nordic Axemen. We don't actually see these guys very often. Great shock unit. I'm not entirely sure I don't see them a great deal, possibly because their armor may not make up for the fact that they've got to charge in. There are light infantry shock units, so sometimes they can struggle to really get an impact before unfortunately the cut up a little bit. But they are a good unit. They are an interesting unit. But again, you don't just see them very often. Got some Dragon Wrath. Again, heavy infantry. A lot of Axemen, actually. I'm surprised, considering we don't get them very often. We have a large number of them. Be interested to see how they do. Maybe we'll see them more often if they perform very well. Again, another Cav unit. Some more Javies, some more Spearmen, and some more crossbows. Interestingly enough, I'm surprised how few that they have in crossbows. I think it's just the 2 units of crossbows and 2 Jav units. I think that one of the advantages from Rune is having a cheaper crossbow unit, especially as armor in this mod can be quite high. Now, what I would say is might not be too bad for them. I mean, they are up against a lot of Sword Quindi, which actually, if they had a lot of range, they could probably take out before they even hit the front lines. The interesting thing is that the Axemen, I think, will struggle against the large number of the missile units that the High Elves have brought opposing them. But having said that, if they can make it so that their cavalry can get rid of the High Elven one, then maybe they'll give them free reign to charge into some of those light infantry units that they have on the other side and really sort of puncture a hole. As I expect that the heavy infantry that he's brought with him will hold up and withstand most of the forces he's got ahead of him. And the crossbows, if used wisely, should be able to take out his more elite infantry forces. Moving over then to the Sylvan Elves, we've got some Pathfinders with some Spearmen. We've got also like 3 units of Archers. We have got a catapult, so this is the first catapult we've seen, so it'd be interesting to see how long that lasts. It is going up against Rohan, which does have a ballista. We got some Blade Masters, great unit, really sort of punishing if they can get themselves into a good position. Some more Spearmen, yeah, so a slightly smaller force, but again, I think that it's always going to be the case when you're playing with these guys. It's going to be slightly smaller just because of the price and cost of the units. And you can see over here he's taking another Pathfinder. So I think he might struggle. Pathfinder's very good, great charge, but if he gets locked down by the Royal Lords, the Royal Guards of Rohan, I think these guys will get evaporated relatively quickly. He needs to make sure he protects these guys to really make sure that they have the great opportunity to get the charge bonuses off. And they might do quite well charging into the Axemen, actually. So it'd be interesting in that sense. Lastly, now not lastly. We next move over to Isengard, commanded by Clueless. We've got some Warg Riders here. We got some Trolls of the White Hand, which has been quite, again, used, I think, effectively in every Isengard battle we've seen so far. We have the Ballista, which we may see some Ballista sniping across from one another, although it is up against the High Elves, which don't, if I remember rightly, have any artillery to oppose it. So it'll be the case of the Orcs of Gundabad may have to remove this off the field unless they can charge it with Rohan's cavalry. Some Nazik High, some Uruk-hai Bodyguard, some Guards of Orthanc. Now, I said this before, people like taking the Guards of Orthanc because they sound pretty cool, they're a high-tier unit, and they are, they do look kind of cool as well, and the backstory and the lore with them is interesting if you ever had the chance to read them. But they're very good at holding the line and holding positions, but in terms of actually sheer numbers of kills, you're probably better with Pikemen. However, because of the way it's an open battlefield, then maybe the Pikemen would have had circles run around them, so it may not be too bad. It'd be good to hold a line, especially against some more expensive sort of, say, elven units. We've got some Berserkers here. And then we've got a number of Wardens of Dunland, which we've seen these more often now. It used to be that we didn't see these guys very often. But it's good to see the Dunland forces coming in. We have a good sort of selection of crossbows. Again, that will be very good. The matchup that they have is against, if you remember, the very elite High Elf army. So the crossbows will really be coming to useful there, and so will the Ballista. Really, if you can really get going, then every hit's going to be sort of quite costly because of the army size he's got and the expense that they are. And he's got some Snaga archers, which I guess are just fodder. I think they're just going to be there to take some hits, take some arrows, I guess. Maybe just using up some leftover money. He's got some Champions of the White Hand and some Warg Riders. Now these guys are going to come in really useful to try and combat the Rohan's cavalry, I think more so than anything. And then last but not least, we have Kuro, which is the one you've all been waiting for, with the Free Peoples of Eredor. I'm going to look a bit like egg on my face now, because I said previously that we don't see these guys very often. 2 videos in a row we have them, but never mind. We have the Grey Company. For those that haven't had an opportunity to see the Grey Company before, you can see them here. They're kind of like, I guess, Rangers, really, but on mounted horseback, very fast. Got some good sort of ammo and damage. We have some Royal Guard here. Look at them there. They look quite similar to the Wardens, which you can get with Arnor, but with slightly more fur. We have a number of Dunedain Rangers here. A good, strong number of Dunedain Rangers. Goodness me, look at that. I mean, they're going to come in really useful. So, if you remember rightly, the Orcs of Gundabad have a lot of sort of arrow fodder, which should get cut up quite well by these guys. So the question is, will these guys run out of ammunition before they run out of fodder to shoot at? We also have a ballista here, so we might have some ballista sniping between the two. We have some Royal Guard. I think we have some Royal Guard, yeah. So a good number of Royal Guards on the flanks there to support. And in the front, he's got spikes for the frontal charge. I don't think we're going to see any of the war forces coming through this way. He's got some militia. So I think these are definitely a unit which was used to make up the cost. But they do look interesting. For a militia unit, look at them there. I mean, you can't fault them in terms of looks, that's for sure. And they'll hold the line relatively well against Orcs here and there, I think. It depends whether their morale will hold up against sort of the weight. And then we've got some Elders at the back, missile unit. You see them there with all their big bushy beards. Followed with some Battle-Ready Dunedain, which again, you'd be crazy not to take these guys. And yeah, second unit of Battle-Ready Dunedain. So, just the one cav unit here. Now, I think that's probably... oh, no, my apologies. He has some Greenway sentries. So... and it looks like 2 units, so it'll be a case of if these guys can get rid of J-Monster's wargs early on, then that should basically give them free reign. It'll be interesting to see what happens here. I think that, from my point of view, I might put money on Kuro's side, just because if they can clear off the relatively smaller cav force of the opposition, I think they've got a good chance. And J-Monster's lack of taking much in the way of archery and ranged units means that he has to go on the offensive, charging into a ballista. So we'll see how it goes. I think that the real question with whether he can swamp them, really, if he can get round, clear them out. But we'll see how it goes. We'll see what happens. But I don't think that the Orcs are going to be able to sit back. And indeed, as I say this, you can see he is moving forward as he has to begin the charge. He has no option. He's probably just thinking about how best to use his Warg Riders at this point. Now, I will keep an eye on the mini-map, but to be honest, I think the other guys are going to probably go into a skirmish phase relatively quickly, and the only army that can't is J-Monsters. As we go up now into normal speed, you can see now that the front line that's going to take the hit is going to be the Marauders mainly, with the spears going onto the flanks, and the Warg Riders, I think they're going to try and flank on and push hard on this side, probably trying to see off the sentries. Really kind of just trying to zone them out as Kuro kind of backs them up now. And I'm just going to see what's happening over here, because one force has moved up relatively far forward here, charging straight in. So Clueless has sent, maybe cluelessly or not, sent his Warg Riders straight up into the missile unit, which is in a staggered defense. And you can see now that the nobles will come in to try and clear them out. It'll be interesting to see how long he leaves them there for. He's taking a significant number of fire, but actually a lot of the arrows are shooting over the top. I think they want to try and get rid of his ballista because they don't really have a counter for it. So he's going to seemingly take up a very slight and small position here, but it does leave him open to being hit by the flanks. To see the Clueless here moving up his wargs to probably strike at the sides. Because of the smaller number of I guess melee infantry, he's going to struggle to be able to lock off all the entry points. As I'm sorry, I'm going to swing over just one more again. I think it looks like there's a cav charge from the far side from... No, he's just moving them up. So you can see here that his missile cavalry has gone up just to harass, I think, and just try and unease Rune, which is actually moving over slightly. I think they're going to go and probably move to join the elves and maybe converge with each other and fight as a singular unit. I think that Clueless's offensive and aggressive stance may work out quite well for him as he brings up his Snugger Archers, which again, I think they're just there to harry them. Yep. Moving over back to where we were before with this sort of massive charge which seems to be taking place. You can see here that this is where the battle will really be won or lost in some respects, as the heavy cavalry and the wargs have charged into one another now, and J-Monster pushed the battle line forward enough to make it so they can bring his infantry into support. And it does look like Kuro had some bandits lying in wait in ambush, a healthy number of it. So we can see here that the Warg Riders are not struggling too much with the Greenway sentries, and I think they're having quite an easy time of it, especially with the support of the infantry, although in theory it doesn't look like they needed it. As the Grey Company comes over now, you can see that the bandits again trying to hold back just some of the spearmen, whilst I guess trying to give his units as much time as possible to fight. Interesting enough, J Monster then stopped his advance once he reached the spikes. He's just sat there in point blank range. But the archer unit did get pulled back slightly, and you can see now the battle lines have now been drawn as J Monster tries to use his superior numbers to flank round, heading now, going for these missile units, and the battle ready Dunedain have to get sort of committed here against the Witch Realm Scourge Raiders. And then on the other side, you can see that he's starting to have some of his cavalry break, and the Warg Riders are going to take the great opportunity here to make the most of that, and they're going to come charging in, probably heading for the juicy targets now of the missile units, which, again, these guys are still relatively healthy. I mean, look at it, 36 and 34. It's almost like they didn't lose anybody in that engagement. And again, as you can see here, the battle ready Dunedain having to be committed there, and J Monster will probably lock them down with one cav unit, while the other cav unit goes and looks for an easier target. And I think that is what's going to happen. And the missile unit has now sort of reformed themselves and repositioned themselves in the hope that they can then sort of fire down and get a better angle. As more and more of the orcs sort of start pushing in for these weaker choker points, trying to push through, disrupt the lines, and the Royal Guard tries to hold for as long as they can with the militia which got sent forward as a little bit of fodder there. However, it does look like they're holding relatively well on this side now, and the artillery continuing to shoot now, targeting the ballista of Gundabad. So they're having a bit of a sniping competition, and they have lost one of the 4, and Kuro has still all of his remaining. But Kuro doesn't really have much he can shoot at with his ballista at this point. He could take pop shots at the Shadow Guard, and he could take pot shots at the reserve spearmen, but actually he hasn't really got that blob I think that he was hoping to go for. It'll be interesting to see how long that survives, as I think the Shadow Guard are now trying to whittle it down. Back over to here then to see how Isengard are doing. So Isengard has seemingly pulled back its cavalry now, continued to leave his Starga forward. I guess it was kind of like, this is what I can do, now show me what you can do back. And he did do relatively well. He took out one army now, one of the units down to 16. As the arrows continue to fire in. He does have to make a choice though what he wants to do. At this point it looks like a lot of the arrows are coming in for the Stargers, and I don't think Clueless is going to mind about that too much. I mean, they're snaked well, they're in loose formation, they're cheap, and again, more arrows that go that way are less arrows that go into his actual units he cares about. But he has got his Warg Riders out in the open a little bit in range there, so they are getting shot down as he moves his ballista. So his ballista was getting targeted quite heavily. It's got 10 people left, so certainly not by any means sort of short, as the rest of the army seems relatively healthy still, with the High Elves kind of using the fortifications on one side and these hills and these barrows on the other to just kind of turtle himself up slightly after the initial assault. And you can see that they are trying to use the fort in here. You can see that Rohan has come inside and he has looked to sort of take control of this area, sticking his ballista up on the hillside, with his Helmengers here firing over the walls, and he's got his Shield Maidens in reserve back here. Now that's a difficult position to assault. I mean, I'd be tempted if I was over here as the Elves and Rune to actually ignore him in there. Let him sit inside his fort if that's what he wants to do. Let him fight in there, and instead focus my attention over here on the High Elves and make Rohan come out. Although, having said that, still a healthy number of Rohan's forces out here, possibly because he suspected that might be a possibility when these two joined up. I certainly wouldn't want to necessarily be assaulting the building as it stands. I think I'd be happy to wait in a bit of a skirmish phase. The question will be, does this catapult last long enough against the ballista? And with the ballista's accuracy and its positioning on the hill, I suspect this will get sniped out relatively quickly. They'd have to be very lucky, but they might be able to get some choice hits early on. If it was me, I think that I would maybe have my catapult over here where I know that it wouldn't be able to be combated, and start targeting some of these armies over here, which is just kind of lined up. It looks like these spearmen are going to be trying to hold the line, stay in shield formation, and try and make it so that the ammunition is wasted, and as the superior range of the elves will come in and they start taking shots now over at the warriors, although admittedly not the most expensive unit to go for. I think we'll see a little bit of a stalemate here for a while. As you can see, the Isengard is probably going to just move this and continue shifting over his ballista to support his ally here. Probably going to try and snipe out this other ballista. Now, if I knew that that was coming over to try and help, I probably wouldn't be doing this. Again, Isengard would be able to attack this ballista if he wants to. Having your catapult as a target is probably not the greatest, and he is moving it now into arrow range, and I'm not quite sure how long the crew will survive. As we head back over to sort of where the real crux of the fight is here, with Kuro and J-Monster. Kuro is a little bit on the back foot now. You can see that he is starting to lose his melee units now from just being swamped and overtaken. What little is he's got left is his missile units and his archers, and it looks like he is going to just try and bug out, I think, and try and join up with one of his allies, which has a little bit more that might be able to support him, which isn't a bad idea. If he can get over to where he has a bit more of a front line again, he might be able to get into a position where he can reform and use that superior archer unit, but without them being able to sort of slow down any on the infantry from J-Monster right now, they're too exposed, and they're probably still healthy in terms of the number of ammunition they've got. The Grey Company is continuing to harass the last sort of any chasing down orcs of Gundabad as he tries to get some of them out of there and some of them to be able to be fleed, with a few rear guards, sort of militia, just kind of holding the line, trying to keep them busy long enough for them to escape. Although most of his units are actually routing, although it's unfortunate there, the Dynadine Rangers got down, sorry, the Dynadine Battle Ready got down to 3, so it'll be interesting to see how many they actually killed. Although unfortunately we won't be able to see that in this recording. And Kuro's actually stopped. He's decided to make a little bit of a stand. I guess he's going to do a little bit of a kiting maneuver. I think he'll move, and then each time J-Monster comes closer to him, he's going to fall back a little bit, and shoot, and fall back a little bit. And we might see a sort of a staggered retreat, as J-Monster has no option but to keep charging face first into the ammunition of the archers. So you can see here that his ballista did get taken out, but did it take out enough? No, so there's still a healthy number of J-Monster's ballistas sort of unit left, and we'll see them. He's going to start probably targeting Isengard and taking out some choice shots now without much in the way of any response. J-Monster's army is still relatively healthy though, so he hasn't really lost that much. I think that he wasn't planning to lose anyway. I think he came off quite well from that battle. As the Berserkers now shifting position, one question will be actually whether Isengard wants to move entirely over, and what happens is they reform altogether. Now, there are good things and bad things. The strength is that they be able to mix their units to better take on what's against them. The downside is they become quite static, and especially since they have a slightly larger, or did have a slightly larger, cav force, that being static might not work out in their favour. But you can see that Isengard is starting to be on the move. He has realized that his flank is exposed. Kuro can't hold it, and the positioning isn't favorable for them. As you can see, hundreds of arrows targeting down here, looking, I think, for the trolls, trying to remove them off the battlefield, trying to get rid of them. I mean, the sheer number of arrows that must have been fired from the High Elves is phenomenal. These guys haven't really stopped since they started. But can they save enough ammunition for the final fight? If they run out of ammunition here, it could cause or put them in a bit of a disadvantage when it comes to the assault. As the crossbows now trying to make their way through, trying to lose as few units as possible, and the trolls remain stood firm, I guess, to keep soaking those arrows as best they can, stop them from hitting sort of lighter armored units. And the wardens, I think the wardens are possibly just being there as a bit of a rear guard, and it looks like J-Monster is just going to sort of take his time, rethink what he wants to do, while still being harassed a little bit by the Grey Company. I think he's going to probably re-strategizing, reconsidering his position, and he'll start moving his units over, although actually he seems to be bringing more forces over into this corner, unless there's something I didn't see. I don't think there's really much left from Kuro to stop him, but he may just be trying to organize them into a bit of a better line. As you can see here that some Blade Masters have been caught out slightly by the Champions of the White Hand, but the thing is that Blade Masters are no easy target, and unless you're going to get some good charge bonuses into there, this isn't really the fight you want to take. For Blade Masters, my advice would be range them down as best as possible. Crossbows, ballistas, anything, but try not to fight them head on. And he's got a really useful unit here, which could really come into play later. That he's unfortunately lost quite a few forces from. I think the crossbows would have been better to target the Blade Masters than necessarily losing his champions to that. And you can see now that they've disengaged, he's in range of the archer fire, which is now coming in relatively hard, taking out. Oh god, they're dropping like flies. Really sad to see. I think that these guys could have been so useful towards the latter end and the later stages of the battle, but taking on Shield Masters just isn't the way forward for Cav units. Again, for those that may have seen the Halls of Philandrel, I was the Witch King. I had a full sort of bodyguard Numenorian Cav unit charged. I think it was I had 32 or 33, charged 6 Blade Masters and lost my general in the first charge. And now the trolls start moving over. And everyone starts positioning themselves, taking the most of these sort of barrows and mounds to get better positioning. So I think it's going to be a case of sort of, you're going to come to us now. We're not going to come to you. So we may see a little bit of who's going to blink first, sort of a Mexican standoff. But you can see that Rune does have a couple of his forces sort of out on the wings. Looks like there was a little bit of a scuffle with some of Rohan's Cav force. Ironically, this is probably where the Chosen would have been really useful to try and support Rune here and taking on the Cavalry. The real question is whether the crossbows that he's got are going to be able to stand and continue against the Royal Guard, which have now come in for a good frontal charge as the tribesmen come in. He's going to run the risk, though, if he starts throwing javelins with a lot of friendly fire, and he probably doesn't want to do that. But you can see that arrows are being fired by the High Elves into this blob, especially with Rohan quite happy about the concept of victory. I don't think he should be doing that. He's killing a lot of his ally. This Royal Guard unit was winning that engagement. They had no problem. They were doing really well against the Brotherhood of the Lance. It was prolonged melee, which these guys were more comfortable in, and they just needlessly killed about 4 or 5 of the Rohan forces when they really just didn't need to fire into it. It just wasn't worth. As you can see now, some more heavy cavalry coming in for a flanking charge on the Royal Guard, which are going straight in towards the tribesmen. Now, this is a better target for the archers. This is where they should be shooting going for. These sort of lightly armoured units out here. Not his own force, although it looks like it was a little bit of a bait there. As you can see, the Javies getting thrown into the Royal Lords, which did take a little bit of a beating from that, and the crossbows still trying to fire. So the idea is that although Rohan is trying to ping-pong his way around, each time he goes to a new location where he's ping-ponging, he's getting hit pretty hard by armor-piercing forces. But it looks like he is in the point where actually I think Rune needs to consider moving out of this position. I think Rohan's superior cav has got into the position where they've made the most of this, and they're locking these guys down. They're killing what he's got in terms of range. As Rune has decided to start moving forward his infantry to combat. Now the downside is that this infantry is now not going to get the support of the javelins or the crossbows because they're too busy being killed by Rohan's cavalry. But I suppose in the same sense his units aren't going to be attacked by Rohan cavalry, but if I was him, I think that I'd be coming off a little bit of the worst out of this. But they have taken on the force I think that they should have done, and ironically I kind of feel like Rune should have considered maybe doing this earlier. The Sword Quindi will probably not hold as well as he thinks they will against his forces, but having said that, the sheer number of the Quindi is what's going to be the problem, which is where his crossbows and jabs would have come into real use. But you can see more and more of his army is engaged. He's going to have to start going up against the sort of the axemen here, and they're going to start flooding towards, and he's going to bring in his own sort of axemen to combat them, but I think that the Riddim-up ones will probably be superior. If anything, I've been tempted to maybe have his Dragon's Wrath over here and his Axeman over here. But it's the choice he made at the time. I think it was just the way it was positioned. Maybe he thought that he could clear these guys out quickly, and then when these guys were cleared out, he could then move on to the next. And it could be about pace more than anything. As he still has some of his Brotherhood of the Lance running around. And you can see here that the Oh, he did have a missile unit. I can't remember if I noticed that at the beginning. But he is going to start harassing the forces here. You can see that there's, I guess, a pitiful number of crossbowmen left. The Javs are dead. The Javs are dead, and a pitiful number of crossbows left. I can see what he was trying to do here, but really I think that he would have been better getting these guys over here and hiding them away, because they probably still have a healthy amount of ammunition left, and Javelin can be really useful, especially against sort of heavily armoured units. And the rear charges now are going to start coming in from the Lancers, and we can watch now as he tries to do a charge in response, but they're going to start dropping relatively healthy. Look at the numbers. Look at the numbers fall from that charge. These guys are phenomenal. If you can really get them moving, get them working, if they don't get locked down by, say, wargs or something like that, then you can see that they're going to make the most of the situation. Although I don't think he's realised he's accidentally run into some heavy archers there. But again, we'll watch another charge coming in. So at this point he has 47, and he's winning. Well, he's not winning the battle, but 47 for here. And from 47 down to 30. So I think it says it all, really. I think that Rune is going to struggle on this side now, as the Royal Guard come in to add insult to injury now that they've cleared up the last of the crossbows. Moving over, we'll just see how the combat's going over the other side. You can see that the combined forces now of the Elves and Gundabad are moving in onto the flank to take on the forces of the Elves, I think supported now by Isengard, which is looking to push forward some more units into this fray. Has Curry still got many of his archers left? Can't see them just now. It doesn't mean he doesn't have them. They may be elsewhere, but this is sort of the next sort of wave of the battle to see how it goes here as the ballista starts coming in, trying to hit some of these nobles, which is a good target, expensive unit, although he does risk killing his own blade masters, who again are confident in their victory. I wouldn't be firing my ballista into there if my blade masters were in there. They're just such a valuable unit, it's not worth doing it. Not when there's sort of, you know, Storm Guard back here. As we see the first general fall. But not while there's such an opportunity here to get some Storm Guard. I don't think I'll be firing into there. And you can see that the Isengard units are now harrying round. Looks like they're going to try and block off the Lords and the Blade Masters, but I think they will probably be quite comfortable at going in and attacking the Guards of Orthanc head on. There's a catapult unit, so they must have. So the ballista snipe from Rohan must have taken them out as they go charging in valiantly. And you can see that the Woodland Sentinels are now coming out of ambush to maybe join. Don't know if they still have any ammunition left, but they may have to stop these Fellas Lords from reaching the crossbows. Nope, they're going to run straight past them. So these guys are going to come straight into the crossbows unless they wheel round to do a rear flank. And it does look like that's what they're heading to do. Again, J Monster continues to just move more and more of his forces in. Keep locking down infantry, and the more infantry he locks down, the more that he can try and get through into the rear. Now, what's surprising is that even under all of this sort of heavy fire, he hasn't had more breaking. Now, partly I think what he's doing is using his slightly stronger forces to soak up the damage, and then he's having a second wave push through afterwards, as you see here with the Berserkers, who were relatively unscathed from the original assault, and maybe that's helping in terms of morale. But I am surprised how well that they've been able to keep their morale up to push through. And you can see they are now going to reach that front line with the crossbows, although there's Kuro's force as they scatter and flee back. Possibly Kuro's repositioning them. They run relatively quickly, actually. Otherwise, they may be in skirmish formation. As the Nazaghai are now having to be committed, as more and more of Rune's forces are breaking on this side. Just to have a look, so you can see here, there's about 50% to 76%. So the battle is not a far sort of gone conclusion, but I think that we're going to start seeing J Monster's sort of allies clear up what's left, and it looks like this ballista was getting fire ammo fired at it by the allies, but I don't know why. I think they're trying to get rid of the Lancers, which are now down to 13. No, the shots are coming from something else. No, I don't know what's going on there. Not sure why he's shooting towards the Isengard forces. As the Royal Lords are now positioning themselves, I think they were harrying down the last of the routing units as the entire large force now, who relatively unscathed from that assault from Rune, make their way over, and Rohan start pushing themselves out from inside this fort. Now, partly you can say that on this side they had the fort, they had better positioning, and therefore they were always going to win. But actually, J Monster didn't have any positioning on his side; he just charged forward. So there's advantages to being aggressive as well. It is a little bit unfortunate for the guys that they didn't have there, but in the same sense, I mean, Isengard moved over his ballista. If they waited a bit longer, then they could have got the catapult into play. He didn't have to move his forces over here to take on the Cav. He could have moved them over here. Like, if you knew that this assault was going to come in, like J Monster was always going to probably keep charging because he had no option. He didn't have to move all of Rune's forces to take on Rohan and the High Elves on this side. It was up to these guys to come and support J Monster. So, if anything, I would have kept moving my forces back, moving them over. I know that the enemy doesn't have any catapult, because I can see it by now. Move them over, link up with Isengard, link up with the Elves, and try and clear out these two armies by themselves. And if these guys aren't going to leave their fort, or not going to move from the other side of the map almost entirely, then they're going to see their allies die before they reach here. But unfortunately, for whatever reason, Rohan moved out, maybe to try and slow them out and down or stop them, and it meant that it was one army taking on two, and the outcome was always probably going to work out in the favour of the two. But I think that maybe if they'd considered moving over here, moving up, joining Kuro's sort of remnants, working as a team, they could have probably cleared out this half of the map, and then if they weren't going to move out of their fort, or if they weren't going to move over here, then these sticky positions would have been lost. But nowadays they can move up with almost nothing against them and finish off the last remaining forces. So I'm just going to speed this up now slightly now, because I don't think there's much more that we're going to see at this point. I think this is kind of the beginning of the end, but you can see sort of where the rivers of the dead have come from, and again, I don't think they're going to be particularly challenged at clearing out the last of this unit. So not the closest of battles, but interesting tactics being used. You can see how the sort of evil faction Orc Swarm can really be beneficial and really pay off. Again, remember that J Monster had, I think, one archery unit and one ballista, and I think the ballista was only really to try and take out any catapult if the opposition had it, because he was going to run forward so quickly and push in so hard. So you can see interesting tactics from all sides. You can see how rear charges can be so devastating, and how not to combat sort of blade masters. But I want to thank everyone who was involved in the battle. I want to thank everyone who was watching the video. If you have any comments, feedback, please leave them below. If you want to help support the channel, there is a Patreon, which description information will contain, and also a Discord where you can join the community if you haven't already. I just want to again, as I said before, we can't do any of this without you guys, so we do appreciate all the effort and support that you give us. And going forward, we are getting closer and closer to the release of the 0.9 patch, which I really hope all of you will continue to promote and grow the channel in the Discord up until that point, as I really would like to see a fantastic launch and really great to see so many people playing it when it's released. I think people will be happy to see the changes that have happened and the feedback that we've received and what the modders have been able to do. If you want to see sneak peeks and early access to sort of images, graphics, and Q&As, then again consider the Patreon. But by no means is it a requirement. As we see here, the sort of the final stand on this hill, as you can't really tell where one of the armies begins and the other one ends. There is still the Twitch competition going for those who are watching via Twitch or on YouTube that wish to try and join the Twitch channel. The first 100 followers gets put forward for a prize draw, so please consider that. You don't have to do anything but become a follower. And if you do find yourself missing the live streams, again, please consider signing up to our YouTube channel. Again, information can be found, and from there you'll be able to see the recordings rendered and chopped. As we come here to the final victory, again, as I said, on the victory screen, wasn't the closest battle in the world, but at least it was exciting and different, and you could see how things go. J Monster actually didn't have the largest army out in the field. Kuro did, of all people, which I wouldn't have thought. But again, I guess because of the amount of militia he had, you can see here just really where the kills was coming from. Rohan, I mean, they're relatively even, actually. I think they all kind of did their part, regardless of the size of the force they brought out. You can see it here, the smallest, which is that elite elven unit, as I thought before. And actually, Isengard was relatively small, partly, I think, because of the trolls and the ballista crew and the berserkers aren't a particularly large army. Just going in then, we'll be able to see where most of the sort of casualties are inflicted by J Monster. We can see he's relatively even across the board. His victory on Blackguard getting 162. Some of his raiders getting 167. That's really good. Surprising to see. Warg Riders doing well for themselves. 95, 88. His blister never really got going, but then again, I think it was really just to try and snipe a catapult, so it did what it needed to do. And you can see the Shadow Guard getting 83, and Hammers, as I said before, 92. Great unit. But again, I don't think he was really pushed. But the tactic was kind of charge, 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 and when you can't charge, keep charging. And then his losses weren't particularly large either. He still had quite about half, just over half, under half of force remaining. Thanks again, everybody, and I will see you guys in, I guess, 2 days' time. Continue to watch and talk to you soon. I've been Cannon Fodder, and thank you.